A real estate real fast. I'm your host, Aaron Jistel. For those of you guys tuning in for the first time, a little bit of background about myself. I'm the broker, one of the co-founders here at ListingSpark. So real estate real fast is a discussion about all things real estate on a variety of topics. A big chunk of our core business and our core audience at ListingSpark is investors. So we always like to have the discussions kind of a little more tailored to investors, whether that's a seasoned investor that's been in the business a long time, somebody interested in just getting started. And so I'm super pumped to have Mike Singletary on. So Mike has been in the real estate world for a long time. You're an investor yourself. You're the CEO of SkipForce, which helps investors with their marketing and lead gen and tracking down the right people to reach out to. And so I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have today. Mike, just let's start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your business before we roll into some questions.
Yeah, for sure, man. Hey, first off, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here. Known about your all's business for a long time and always been super impressed with that. So my name is Mike Singletary. I've been an investor for not that long of a time. It's actually just about 8 years ago. Before that, I like to tell this story because it just kind of shows how much you can learn in a very, very short period of time. But before that, I was in a totally different industry. I owned high-end hair salons in Houston, Texas. And I always knew that I wanted to get into the real estate space, but being an agent really wasn't my thing. So I kind of dived into the investment space. And that was 8 years ago. So I sold that business probably about 4 years ago and, kind of burned the ships and probably had over about 500 transactions, started in the Central Texas. And then now we're completely virtual. I haven't looked at the last, 100 or so houses that we've actually purchased. And we're all over the state of Texas, all in the metro, mainly the metro areas. We're in Tennessee and we're just about to get into North Carolina. Wow. Once I got into this game, I realized really, really quickly that, we are in the marketing game. And, that the houses were just widgets. So we're in the marketing and sales game. Essentially, the houses were just widgets. And so data was really king. And so, we were one of the first people to really embrace telecommunications marketing at that time, which was, at that time, texting. And we were, I think, the first in our area to text. And so we were paying a lot for data. And so I've always been an entrepreneur. I've never had a real job. And so, of course, like every entrepreneur, you're like, hey, listen, how can I find a better way and a cheaper way that is, that's going to be more beneficial for my business? And the more I kind of dug into that rabbit hole, we found a better alternative for skip tracing and data. And then we just turned it into a business. And now, we have about 1,000 clients that use SkipForce, and it's become my primary business. It's one of my favorite things to do. I talk to high level and beginning investors every single day with our clients to see what's going on, what's working for them. And, we're adding products always to see if we could help them grow their business. So that, in a nutshell, that's it.
Awesome. Love it. I love the comment you made, burn the ships, because I think, we go to a lot of, I'm sure you do too. We go to a lot of networking events and masterminds and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people that are interested in getting into investing, they haven't stepped out of their previous business yet. So they're looking for maybe another stream of income. They're tired with a 9-to-5 and they want to get into investing. And I think the biggest problem for most people is they don't know when that right time is to jump out of that kind of steady, I've got a great job or a good paying job. How do I leave this to go into something that I don't know or I'm not really good at yet? And I think really for most people, the biggest thing that scares them is they don't have a pipeline of business. They may have done a deal or two, but they don't have that kind of steady flow of leads. So, one thing you were just talking about, you specializing in, is utilizing outbound marketing, lead generation, things like that. So let's just talk about some strategies investors can use, maybe through SkipForce or just some other advice to investors getting rolling. How do they keep a strong pipeline of business so they can have consistency?
Yeah, I mean, like in any other sales position, right? Or marketing position, it's all about making sure that pipeline is 100% full or as full as possible. And so I wouldn't recommend people doing it like I did. I would probably have done a little bit more of a slower increment, but you want to definitely be able to get that lead generation going on a consistent basis. Now, telecommunication marketing, it's just changed throughout the years. Now it's more into cold calling than texting because of regulations. It has to, for me, it is one of the best campaigns out there because for me, personally, I'm an aggressive person. I like to initiate the actual lead generation rather than, sending out direct mail. And I'm not saying that direct mail doesn't work. Everything works. But I like to lead the charge rather than, waiting for the leads to come to me. So when it comes to telecommunications marketing, you really need to refine your pitch. And the best way to do that, if you can't do it, is just to hire people and to have them trained either by somebody else or, well, I guess if you're new, it's going to be hard for you to train them, but I would probably have them trained by somebody else. And then once the leads come in, you work those leads and build that pipeline up until you can build your business.
Yeah. I think one thing that a lot of people get afraid of too is that it's fear of failure. It's fear of, am I going to screw up this call? I think if you're working on a big enough list, we were just talking before we came on, we've got a mutual friend who owns the Roddy list, there's lots of ways to go out and get lists, pull these into your sales funnel, use tools like Skipforce to get their information. And for me, the biggest part is just kind of doing it, right? So there's a ton of resources, whether you just hop on YouTube and there's a huge network of investors out there that are really open source training people to do what they do, right? And so there's ways to find a script, refine that, trial and error. But I think the biggest part is just getting out there and doing it. So we're huge proponents of outbound sales here at ListingSpark. So in the other room right here, we've got a sales team that's calling, potential sellers, investors, things like that. And I totally agree with you. The best way to really engage with people and get them interested in what you're doing is to get them on the phone and talk to them.
Yeah.
I think direct mail or even texting, the end goal is to get a conversation, right? You're not gonna buy or sell a house through a text message. There's no silver bullet. At some point, you're gonna have to get on the phone and talk to people. So one topic that we were talking about when I was asking you to come on the podcast, you're talking about how to create an effective outbound sales team. So let's talk a little bit about that on how an investor can either partner up or bring a salesperson on and really see some solid results by putting together a strong team.
Yeah, there's several ways, like everything else, of attacking it, right? Um, if you've never cold called, maybe you should get on the phone for a little bit to sharpen your skills. Just like you said, we found that the best sales system in anybody that's actually selling a course on how to sell, or all the things that you see on YouTube, they're pretty much Sandler based. So if you don't understand or have ever studied the Sandler sales system, I would probably go and do that first, right? And then you could add things in there like Chris Voss and gap selling techniques. There's a lot of different techniques that you can incorporate. But to build out your team, we're actually just started an academy, because one of the biggest struggles that people have with cold calling is because they don't get the results they need because their outbound agents just aren't trained well enough. And what you need to do is that once you hire an agent, here's what a typical unsuccessful investor does. They'll hire an agent, typically the cheapest they could find, and probably has, not the best English, probably from the Philippines or somewhere else. Give them a script, run through it a couple hours, half a day, and then, put them on a dialer, and then wonder why they're getting really, really bad leads, right? And it's the worst thing to do. And the reason why I know that is because, I did that at the beginning. And I think a lot of people did that at the beginning. So we've come up with a system that we'll tell you what to do. It's pretty easily, but if you don't have the capability of doing it, we could actually do it for you. You have to go through a foundations training. And it typically takes 3 to 5 days to sit there for at least 3 to 4 hours and walk them through every single step of the process. And even as the most basic step, the very beginning step is actually real estate terminology. We believe that you should not be script based. You should understand the script. It's really important that, what is the most important thing when it comes to any kind of sales, which is active listening, right? And the biggest disqualifier when it comes to cold calling right now is the agent's voice, their accents. I mean, because people are being bombarded by them. And if they're just so script oriented, they just really bypass the most important part, which is obviously active listening, but really, any kind of pain that's associated with that particular seller. So that's why that foundations training is so important, that, we tell our agents that you are an actor, and that script is just a script. And, you have to be able to know the components of it. And the dialogue is really dictated by, the seller. And the main thing is for us to understand their problem, and it's not easy. It is not easy what we do, because if you do it effectively, it's really counterintuitive. So we go through that process, and we say that you got to build your sales team like an orchestra. And what that really means is that you don't just give them a script, you give them a little bit more so that they could be more, but you'll start seeing the cream rise to the top. You'll see some prospectors are like, man, those guys are really good. You could transition them over to a leads manager and even an acquisitions manager fairly easy if you've trained them really, really well at the beginning.
I could not agree more. I mean, I think the big thing that a lot of investors have to realize, or anytime you're reaching out to somebody and trying to solicit their business, active listening is huge, and understanding you're a problem solver, right? That person is needing to sell their house because they have a problem. The roof is caving in and they can't fix it. The AC doesn't work and it's about to be summer. There's something going on with that person that they have to sell their house. And the only way to figure out what those problems are is ask them questions and then listen to their answers. And then from there, you kind of curate a plan on how you're going to be able to come in and help them get the deal done, whether that's you're trying to find subject to deals where they're going to leave the underlying mortgage in place. You've got to be able to properly articulate what those kind of solutions are going to look like for that person. But I think in order to get there, everybody has to really come to this realization that it's not about talking at or to the person. It's about discovery, asking questions, figuring out what's going on in their life. How are you going to be able to help them? And the reality is you can't help everybody, but the goal is every conversation you can refine what you're doing and get better. And that's why I'm a big proponent of just kind of getting out there and doing it. It's okay to fail. You don't know you're not learning anything until you're actually trying and failing to some degree. And so I think another thing, I know you're a big data guy. So, we track a lot of KPIs or key performance indicators. And I think that's some other things that investors have to get really good at doing, is understanding when you're getting leads, nothing is free. So typically you're going to buy a list, you're going to subscribe to a list, you're going to do something, you have costs. So you want to understand what that investment is costing you and what you need to do in order to see a return on that. So, I mean, for us with our sales team, we're tracking things like, what's your connection rate? Can that improve? The more people you call, the more people that pick up, the higher your chances are of success. How many people do you need to talk to and have a substantive conversation to have a lead that's kind of moving down the funnel into a more kind of high value zone that you might be able to close? And I think having a system to track that information and track that data, not just for the right now, but so you can kind of go back and look and see how you've improved and what's worked and things like that. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit about how you use data for both sales and marketing to be successful.
Yeah. So obviously I own a skip tracing company, and what we did with the skip tracing company is that we found that source, and it's from a carrier database, right? And we were the first one to bring that to market. So what that gives you is just like really unique numbers. And even we give you the time of day those numbers are most active. Now, the one thing that we found out that it focused on quality, so the hit rate wasn't there. And that's really one of the determining factors that people always like say, that what's the hit rate? And the hit rate really doesn't mean anything. Hit rate means if you send me a list of 100 phone numbers and I give you 90 back, then it's a 90% hit rate, right? So we added a second database to be able to fill in the gap, essentially. So because most people that are doing this at a high level, they're using multiple skip tracing services. And what we did is that we put them in one database, and we're able to waterfall that list. I know these terms are kind of probably a little bit too advanced, or maybe it's not, I'm not sure. But what we want to do, the most important things when you get the list, if you're using telecommunications marketing, or even if you're not, you want to make sure that you're talking to the right person, right?
Sure.
Unbelievably important. The right person contact. Now you hit it. Connection ratio is obviously unbelievably important, but when it comes to cold calling, you could have the right person on the phone, and all they have to say is like wrong number, right?
Yep.
But what we do what's super important for us is that when we get a list, we want to sit there and it's in our a list organizer. We want to make sure that if we get the right person, even if they are not motivated or wanting to sell or whatever the case is, that is the most important KPI for us, because that way we could always come back to them, right? We could always come back to them because they're on that list for a reason. We're not just randomly calling people. Usually, since we have more of a shotgun approach, we don't do just high equity, right? Typically, it has some kind of distress filter attached to that house, and if I have the right person, that means that I could retarget them in different ways, and
Right.
we found that to be the most effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I, I think people's situations change, right? So a lot of
Right.
people, it's about avoidance, right? They get themselves in trouble. They've missed a payment or two. They've got maybe a code violation with the city and they can't pay. There's something going on, and everybody thinks they're going to get it figured out, right? So they don't immediately go into this mode like, oh, it's over. I've got to sell everything and get out of here. A lot of people wait until the absolute last minute, and that could be, in some cases, it could be 6 months away from when their first missed payment, depending on what the bank's doing, if they're trying to work with them. So I think understanding exactly when you've got the right person, and an original no doesn't mean you should stop or there's not another future conversation that can happen, because the reality of it is like most people haven't found that secret list that nobody else has. I mean, a lot of people have
Everybody's
access.
been hit.
Everybody's got the list. Everybody's
Everybody's been hit.
calling, but not everybody keeps calling. Not everybody goes back to that list 30 days later, 60 days later. And so you can't get down in the dumps. You can't get beat up if on that first call you're getting a lot of hangups, or that opening line didn't resonate and the conversation didn't go anywhere. Chances are you're going to get another swing at it. So, we talk to sellers sometimes for, like I said, 3 to 6 months before they realize, I just can't help myself any longer. I need to bring somebody in to help me get this done. You guys have been persistent. You've given me great value. We've had a lot of great conversations. I feel confident now you're the right fit for me. And that took a long time to get that figured out. So I think with that being said, yeah, man. So with that being said, you hit the nail on the head a minute ago. Like you find the right person, it's them, you've got their number, or maybe you don't know 100% it's them. What are some things that you do or say in the very beginning that maybe forces them to tip their hat, and you can actually get them to kind of self-identify as the right person you're trying to get a hold of?
Oh, this is so simple, man. It's so simple that it's silly, right? And we literally tell them to never ask, is this, Mike?
Right.
Every single time we call, we're like, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, every single time. Like, it's supposed to be like you're talking to a friend or a neighbor.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Because guess what? If I'm not Mike, I'm going to say, hey, no, this is not Mike. Right. Because they're a little jumbled at the beginning. They're like, who is this? What's going on here? And if you haven't rotated your numbers, which is another topic, your ID might have, spam likely or something like that, right? Associated with it. But at the very beginning, it's always that. And it's at a neutral to up tone, just their name. And then you introduce yourself, and then you can move on, but you pause as soon as you say their name, and it's unbelievably effective.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. It's funny because you just kind of have to detach yourself from the situation and say, look, if I got a sales call or a spam call, what is going to be the dead giveaway? And the problem is most people still do those things because they hear other people doing them. And so they think that's the way you do a sales call. But yeah, I mean, I can't think of many people when they call me up, when the call starts as, hey, is this Aaron? That this is going to be a buddy of mine that I actually really want to talk to.
Right, exactly.
Right. It's like, man, I'm being sold something. I'm either going to get off this call as fast as I can, or, I'm just going to be coming in with my guard up. So
absolutely.
So simple. And I love that. I wanted to let everybody know, because we are live, we do a live Q&A here at the end. So Michelle, it's good to see you. Thanks for chiming in on the chat. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat here in a little bit. We'll go through those questions and do kind of a live Q&A with Mike.
Cool.
So feel free to interact and ask questions. A couple more, Mike. So just for both new and seasoned investors, just what's some advice, some tips and tricks that you've kind of learned along the way?
I mean, I don't think there's really anything new or magical about this business. It's actually a relatively simple business, but very difficult to execute. And I think you nailed it on the head. The pipeline has to be full, and you have to follow up. And the most basic things are not being executed. And I get cold calls all day, every single day, because obviously I own property, right? And I'll pick up just to see what their pipeline looks like, or what the sales funnel looks like. Not pipeline, but what their sales funnel looks like. And I can't tell you how many times this happened. First of all, the call is horrible, and I'm kind of grilling them, and they can't execute the initial call, or they never even call me back whenever I tell them I'm interested.
Right.
So the ability just to follow up, because when it comes to cold calling, and you hit this on the head, it is not a short sales cycle. Very rarely are you going to get somebody on the phone and call them and close them right away, right? It's typically a 3 to 5 to 6 month sales cycle, because, if you do it right, you're in front of them before anybody else. Now, when it comes to, other leads, like, inbound leads like PPC, direct mail, which is exponentially more expensive, but the sales cycle is a lot shorter.
Right.
But you have to answer your phone. I know it. I mean, everybody wants to have this, like, I don't know, this genie in a bottle a solution to why I'm not buying houses. One, you got to answer your phone. Second, you have to know how to execute whenever you do answer your phone. And that's essentially it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I know, with ListingSpark and Spark Title and some of the other businesses we're running, we don't do as much of the kind of activities that your average investor does. We do a lot of sales and running our sales team here in the business. But I know you've met my business partner, Brett, and back when we were doing more investing and wholesaling and things like that, a couple of tricks that we kind of learned along the way is you've got to learn how to not kind of commingle your personal stuff with your business stuff. And what I mean by that is, if you're using your regular cell phone that you use in your everyday life to be making outbound sales calls, your phone is going to ring, and it's going to ring from your buddies, your wife, your friends, spam, things like that. So having things like a dedicated line that you only use for business, that you can track and you can open up, like using a voice over IP, Ring Central is a good example. It's a really popular one. I mean, you can open that up on a daily basis and see how many calls did you make, how many were outgoing, how many were incoming. When that phone rings, it's essentially like the bat phone, right? So if you're doing a direct mail campaign and you've got that number on it, when that phone rings, there's only one reason it's ringing. And so when it's your cell phone and you've been getting spam calls all day, you might not pick up. When you know it's that line that you just spent $1,000 on a direct mail campaign, when that phone rings, you're going to be sure to pick it up. So, I mean, I think the one thing that investors need to understand is, if you're going to make this a business, you have to treat it like a business and look at the things you're doing. Maybe if you're still at your day job, what are some things that you're doing at your job that it makes that business successful and makes it run and allows you to be effective? And then take those same lessons and turn them into the investing world, because it's hard to do this as just a hobby. I mean, it's hard to just stumble across great deals that are just going to make you a ton of money. You have to grind it out. You have to work at it. You have to be consistent. And so those are just a few things that we would find it was an absolute must when we were trying to track down new leads and new opportunities. It's like, we need to be able to go back and know for sure which campaign was working right. So having the right tracking mechanisms in place. QR codes are a big deal right now. So, we do direct mail campaigns for ListingSpark, and each campaign has its own QR code that's taking it to a landing page, and I can see who hit that page, how many times. And so all those things are incredibly important. So
Are you retargeting them with a specific ad? Like, so if you had a probate list that you're sending, are you hitting them the QR code with with something for probates on the retargeting side?
Absolutely. So we'll do retargeting with different ads depending on what campaign that's running. If we're running Facebook or Google ads, you want to have the right setup to where once they hit your page, you're going to drop a cookie on them and follow around the internet. They're going to start
Absolutely,
seeing
man.
little ads everywhere. And so I don't think people understand, even your average investor, those are not things that are exclusive to big businesses or big organizations. Like anybody can do those things if
It's
they
not
have
difficult. It
a place.
really isn't. And that's something I didn't understand at the beginning, right?
Right.
You just have to pay somebody in the front end, put the pixel in there, and do that and just retarget them and be in front of them, being omnipresent as much as possible.
100%.
But I think you nailed it. I mean, and that phone always rings in the most inappropriate time too.
For sure. For sure.
No, so if you can't get to it, you have to have a call center
Yeah,
pick up that line for you. All right.
absolutely.
Unbelievably important that phone call gets picked up, because the psychology of especially an inbound lead is that they're going to call, and the first person that picks up, guess what? They're going to
Yeah,
probably get their business if they have any kind of sales skills whatsoever, because they're not just calling you, they're calling the next person and next person. And whoever solves that problem for them, they're going to get that business. So
that's exactly.
unbelievably important.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Well, before we jump into Q&A, you piqued my interest a little bit, Mike. So tell me a little bit more about kind of the Skip Force University that you're running, or the course that you're running. I know I'm a huge proponent of education. I think it's just wildly important. I just don't think you get good at things without being a student first. So I'd love to hear more. Tell us a little bit about that. And then for anybody listening in now or later, I'd love for you to just drop some information on where they can find you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really in beta. So we just started, and it's out of necessity again, because whenever somebody, like I says, leaves our platform, we obviously send them a questionnaire. And if they say that, cold calling isn't working for them, we want to dive in and figure out why. And it's always because, they're getting bad leads. And typically, because we do nothing but cold call, it's just typically they just don't educate their ISAs. And so we created this to help our clients out. And essentially it's per ISA $550 that you go through a foundations course that we completely teach them for you for 3 days. And then it allows you to kind of go into a club that we call the Iron Agent Club, Iron Drilling Agent Club, which is just a play on iron sharpens iron. And they could come in unlimited amount of times for that month and do live drillings with our team, our ISAs that are closing deals right now. And it's unbelievably effective because these other agents are foreign as well. And so it kind of resonates with them. But, one thing that you have to do when it comes to, effectively building out your sales team is to way more drilling than what you think you're doing. I mean, if you're doing drilling once a week, with most people do not, that's okay. That should be at the baseline level. You should be drilling at least twice a week just to make sure that they're sharp, because it's an unbelievably tough job. You're sitting there, all day pounding the phones, people cussing you out, whatever, right? It's really easy to be demoralized and really easy to kind of fall into what we call the dummy curve. It's essentially what it is, that they'll learn, they'll do the things you tell them to do. They have a lot of success, and then once they have a little bit of success, they hit that bottom and they start just kind of ad-libbing and doing their own thing, and then it just kind of bottoms out on you. And when they go back on the upswing again, is because they understand the craft and they do what they did at the beginning, but with purpose, right? And so we're trying to teach them how to be unbelievably, on point and sharp. And it takes a lot of time and effort. And most people just can't do it. And so we're providing that service for them, essentially.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think what's so important about somebody who's actually trying to really run a real estate investment business, whether that's actually flipping or wholesaling or whatever you're doing, I think people underestimate the value in having an ISA, or in having somebody that's dedicated just to the acquisition side and sourcing those leads. Because when it comes to sales, what most people won't maybe admit to themselves is they will find a million other activities to do throughout the day, rather than do the prospecting, which is the really most challenging part of sourcing deals. And so having somebody that you work out the right comp structure on, the right incentivization, they have a very honed skill set, and they can just do it every day, inside and out, and they're talking to a high volume, high velocity of people. It's transformative to a business, because I think what most people, and this is not just even in real estate investing, this is like for any of my real estate agents that are out there listening right now. It's similar just in the real estate brokerage or real estate agency space, is that if you want to have consistency, you want to have a kind of solid funnel of business, it's all about being consistent with your prospecting and your lead generation. I think some people just need to admit to themselves, this is not necessarily what I'm good at. Maybe they're good at having that closing conversation. Maybe they're good when somebody is already interested and they want to get an offer and you want to talk the mechanics of that offer. Maybe that's kind of their strong suit, but really the secret sauce is kind of the bulk, high velocity, high volume calling to generate leads. So I think having an ISA is super important. It can be transformative to your business. Do you have some tips on kind of putting together an ISA team? Do you like a certain way of putting together your comp structure, incentivizing, finding higher quality leads to move down funnel? Is a certain way you like to structure that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, when you put in an ad for an ISA, so our sales team is a combination of people from the Philippines and from Central America, and so you always have to put a filter in there. Obviously, you want their English to be, average or better. We want them to submit a video with audio so that we could listen to them.
Right.
We want them to have a disc profile. Typically, if you're doing a disc profile, high D, high I are usually the best agents. As far as like our compensation, it depends. It depends when they start at a certain wage. It depends on their skill set. They'll start at usually between $4 to $5 an hour, and we increase it $1 every 6 to 12 months. But in that process, they're able, if they submit a qualified lead, they get a $10 bonus, and then if we actually buy the deal from them, they get a percentage of that too. So we really don't have a big turnover rate. I mean, in that industry, which is very, very odd because there's a very high turnover ratio within that. But with us, they stay with us for a very long time because they're able to earn more income with us than they can do with their competitors. And I think that's super important. Now, I'm kind of going back, a little bit, people, because sometimes we're like, oh man, 550 is a lot or whatever. And then you don't have to pay me. If you could do it, that's great. Here's the most important thing. You're spending so much money on data, and truthfully, you're losing the opportunity cost of not training your agents is immense. Right. And so I think it's unbelievably important that you got to put the time. If you can't do it, you got to outsource it. You put that time and it's going to pay off in dividends for you.
Absolutely. No, I could not agree more. Couldn't agree more. And if you feel like it's overwhelming at times, we've talked on previous episodes, find a partner, find somebody that has maybe a similar risk profile to you and is willing to come in with a certain investment and get things rolling. We see this all the time, to where we'll go to these meetups and you'll have a conversation with somebody who's an amazing talker. They have incredible interpersonal communication skills. They have no money and they have no idea what they're doing, right? And they don't know how to analyze a deal. They don't know how to close that deal, but they can go knock on a door and they can talk to anybody who is on the other side. And so I think partnering is another really important thing as well. If you feel like you can't kind of travel that journey by yourself, or you're not confident enough. And the thing about real estate investing too is you got to remember, you don't have to partner forever. You don't have to pick somebody that's going to be, you're going to go into business with this person for the next 20 years. We have a lot of investors who partner on a deal or two or three deals, and then they do their own stuff on the side. And so there's a lot of different ways you can structure it. But I think the big thing is, ultimately having a plan, creating a roadmap, understanding what success looks like, and then how you can kind of build on that. And so, man, this has been a lot of fun. This is great stuff. So if anybody,
I'll add one more thing here, because I know this is a lot when it comes to like hiring a VA or hiring an ISA, and you really don't understand it. And I'll be more than happy to share this with your audience. So you can get a hold of me at mike@skipforce.com. So that's mike@skipforce.com, and I will send you specifically the requirements that we look for. And one, you got to have the right equipment also to execute. So that's something that I didn't really specify, and you definitely want to get that, understand that up front before you hire anybody.
Yeah, 100%. We've got a couple minutes left. If anybody wants to chime in with questions, feel free. I can tell you that we have used SkipForce here at ListingSpark. It's an awesome service. I always love to bring people on that are kind of in that been there, done that category. And so, Mike, you clearly know what you're talking about. So anybody out there who's looking for some different resources, definitely hit Mike up. You talked a little bit a second ago about tools. I mean, do you have a recommendation on certain dialers or VoIP services? Is there anything in there that you found that just works better than others?
You know, one of the things that I like about having our own sales system is having control of the dollar. Because whenever, I'm not saying that there's outbound services that aren't good. We know a couple that produce pretty good results, but having control of that dollar is unbelievably important. And we hop around. I'm not going to lie to you. We're I think we've used smartphone. We used all of them. So, but for an easy user interface, probably something like Mojo works really well. Even smartphone works pretty well. I would stay away from, oh gosh, what's the name of it now? I'm going blank, but I could create a list for you, but I would probably go within those two. Mojo Call Tools works pretty well as well. Since we are completely virtual, like I work out of my home. And so I had an office probably about 3 years ago, and we went virtual before COVID. So it didn't really affect us much. We use a lot of Slack. We have a customized Podio that we've built out ourselves, but you don't really need a lot to execute. I know people that are doing high volume, they still use an Excel spreadsheet, as hard as that is to conceptualize, but you just need to be able to stay on top of your leads. And there's a lot of other CRMs out there, and I'm a big KISS rule guy, so just keep it super simple. Let me see what else we use. We use CallRail quite a bit. Here's a tip when it comes to outbound calling, or even when it comes to CallRail. When you're not doing outbound calling, or when you're doing just follow-ups, you have to change your numbers a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot, right? Because it's going to get flagged right away. And then once it's flagged, it just, their connection ratio kind of plummets.
Yep. Yeah. We're swapping numbers multiple times a month.
Do it a week almost, man.
Yeah, it's a weekly thing. All the carriers are getting really, really good about it.
Yeah.
And what we came to learn is a lot of that, the culprit is texting. So we do a lot of calling. We do a lot of texting. We like to pair call, text, email, those things together work really, really well.
Yes.
But now when you do a lot of texting, it's really easy to mark as spam when you're texting. So we found out for us, that seems to be hurting the numbers even more than the calling, because when you call and they don't pick up, they don't know it's spam. They don't know to mark it as spam. But when you get a text, that's that's right there. All they have to do is open up their text, mark it as spam, and then that happens enough times, that number's dead. It's just going to show up on every carrier. So swapping numbers is really important. Most platforms now that you're going to use that are going to be dialers have it's really easy to swap out numbers on a consistent basis, and it's in their system in a really easy to use way.
It's not cheap, but you 100% want to do it.
Yeah, no doubt. The other thing I really love about dialers too is that it kind of forces you to block out a time to make those calls, right? So you got an ISA team, that's their job. So there's no question they're going to do it. And that's pretty easy to track. You can see how many calls they're making, what's their connection rate, what's talk time. All of those are KPIs that you definitely want to track. If you're not at the point where you're either ready to try an ISA or you want to give it a try first, the reason why I like using dialers a lot is because you can load in a list and it's a forcing function for you to get through that list. Because it's just going to call and then go to the next number, and it's going to go to the next one. It's going to keep going. Whereas when you're just sitting there plugging numbers into your phone, it's just easy to get distracted and say, okay, I'll come back to this and I'll finish this list later. It's really hugely important to time block, load that list in, get through the list and say, okay, I've done my time blocked amount of prospecting today. I can check this off my list and I can move down and accomplish the other things I have for the day, and just feel good that you got your prospecting portion out of the way for the day. So I love the idea.
Imagine cold calling without a dialer. mean, truthfully, just like pounding away. Right. I mean, that would just be miserable, I would think, right? So
100%.
It's just not an efficient use of your time.
100%.
Yeah.
Hard to believe it's already been 40 minutes, Mike. I really appreciate
it. That was awesome, man.
It flies by every time, especially this one, man. This was great great content for anybody that's tuning in later. If you have any questions, Mike at skipforce.com. You can just go to skipforce.com, hit them on the website as well. It's an awesome service. I was telling Mike right before we started, we've got some new lists that we're going to be hitting up probably first of the year. So I'm going to be hitting him back up to keep our account rolling. And this was incredibly valuable content. I really appreciate your time. And everybody, thanks again for tuning in. This was episode 10 of Real Estate Real Fast. We try to go live on a weekly basis. I don't know if we're going to always be able to pull in guests as good as Mike, but we're going to do our best to keep it rolling. And Mike, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thanks, man.
All right, guys.